Welcome to Agency Acquisitions and Exits. I'm your host, Peter Lang. Today, we welcome Liz Adamson. Since 2011, Liz led teams and agencies working with Amazon sellers. She had a good opportunity to merge her company in with someone who was growing through acquisitions. They had a very clear destination, the next big exit. Come join us. She shares how that first transaction felt, what it meant for her and her team, and ultimately what that next big event that happened a year after she joined, what it looked like. You don't want to miss the sage advice she gives you about how to lock in your contracts, what to set as the right expectations, and the potential disruption of integrations. So let's dive in. Liz,
Okay.
thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Give us the background. You have this entry into various parts of the M&A experience. How did you get there?
Yeah. Well, I had founded my own marketing agency back in 2015 and had a great experience doing it. I had a very small team of people, worked with great clients. Got to a point where it was time to really start getting serious about scaling. And I wanted either a partner to help me do that, or I wanted to work with a larger company. I was also, quite frankly, at a point in my life where I wanted a little bit more financial stability. And being part of a larger company seemed to be a good opportunity for me to do that. I had 3 young kids. Expenses were rising, kids starting high school, and so as much as I love being an entrepreneur, joining a larger company felt like it might offer a little more financial stability while I kind of navigated my kids' teenage years. Um, I had a part of my success in being an entrepreneur was because I had a large network of colleagues and other agencies and people I knew in the space. And so I started just kind of really just talking to some people about, hey, I might be, looking for to join forces with another company and a larger opportunity, and started chatting with some people. And I was actually approached by one person who I'd known in the space, and we began some serious talks, and something just didn't feel quite right. As much as I felt like I knew him and trusted him, I'd met his business partner, and as soon as I met his partner, I had that feeling in my gut of something. I'm not sure I could work with this person. I like partner A, but partner B started saying some stuff that just didn't jive with me, and felt like it might be a difficult relationship if I were to join that company. And so, interestingly enough, a friend of mine had just gone through a merger with his agency. I called him up on the phone and said, "Hey, this is what I'm doing. I got this offer, and I'm not feeling very sure about it. And can you give me some advice? How was your merger? What would you recommend I look to? What kind of questions should I ask?" He gave me some great advice, and we talked for a little bit. And then, 30 minutes later, he responds with a text saying, "Our CEO wants to meet with you." And so that resulted in another series of meetings with a different agency, and they were people that I knew and respected a long time in the space. They were known in the space to be trustworthy, to have good morals, to just be generally good people. They'd built a strong business. They were really sharp and smart. And so I ended up saying no to the first acquisition, and yes to the second. It was kind of a night and day experience where I just felt very kind of anxious and unsettled about the first opportunity. But just by networking and talking to people, the second opportunity opened up for me. With people that, I'm not kidding, I had 5 people I had a mental list of 5 people that I would have loved to have worked with. And in this company were 3 of those 5. They had all just kind of joined forces over the years. That's how they had gotten together. But so it was an amazing experience to be able to join that company and go through that acquisition. No regrets about that at all. Had a wonderful time. Our agencies were very similar, except my agency had some strengths that theirs did not. And so I basically brought over kind of a lot of knowledge and know-how and tools and resources that can help them continue to build their agency. So I kept doing what I loved to do, which was primarily in the advertising space and media marketing space. And they gave me, they had full trust in me and let me build what I wanted to build, as I was trying to expand their agency into that area that they had not been very strong in before.
That's wonderful. Like
Yeah.
you have such nuggets in there that are important to highlight. One is you're very aware of the constraints of running your own business and kind of what it could take to take it to the next level, and you don't have to go at it alone.
Mhm.
Then you we're open to discussions, right? Part of finding a good deal is talking about doing a deal with someone, or discovery and learning and asking people that you know, reaching out to your
Mm-hmm.
network, and then
Mm-hmm.
not accepting the first offer, the first
Mm-hmm.
one, getting a
Mm-hmm.
second opinion and what that second opinion can open as a door. And then to do a deal that's good fit. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
double tap that for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
What about a good fit? Maybe both in culture, business model. What
Mm-hmm.
were some of the key bits that made that first deal really strong for you?
Yeah, culture was big for me. I had known there was four partners in the business that acquired me. I knew three of them fairly well. A fourth one I had interacted with occasionally. Um, it was a good cultural fit. We had the same philosophies around work-life balance. We had the same philosophies around how to treat our people. We had the same philosophies around nurturing and developing our people. One of my core values is personal development, both for myself and for my employees. I believe in giving my employees opportunities to grow and learn and develop and aspire to whatever goal they have, whether it's with my company or a different company. I'm going to enable them to grow and reach their own personal and professional goals, and we aligned very well. I aligned very well with those four partners on those ideals, on kind of a people first mentality, and almost in business is there to support the people, but without the trust and support of the people, we weren't going to have a good business. And so really culturally we were a very good fit, and so we meshed very well. And as I alluded to earlier, we were both in the agency business, serving specifically Amazon. We were specifically helping Amazon customers sell and launch their products on Amazon. Um, and I focused primarily in the advertising side, and they were very strong in kind of the operations side and some other things. And so it became this natural, overlapping of skills and abilities that still served a single purpose. We kind of were able to, by merging together, we were able to round out what we were able to offer our customers and clients, and able to grow our customers and clients in new ways that we couldn't do it separately. So it was a really synergistic acquisition that we went through. And they had part of the reason they were looking to acquire is because they had an open leadership role that they needed to fill, and they thought that I would fill that well. And so I stepped right in and began that journey of serving their clients and bringing in my business to complement their existing business.
Now, was this their first acquisition or merger?
No, in fact, they built their company through acquisitions, and so I was their third. They had an acquisition and then a merger, and then I was the third acquisition, or the third, M&A, I should say.
So they had this gap. They realized
Mm-hmm.
M&A was going to be a critical part of
Mm-hmm.
solving that gap. It's not too often someone like you, Liz, is available on the market just to step into a leadership role. So
Mm-hmm.
obviously, it's a great way to find someone who could contribute to an expanded contribution to a business. How many people did you have in your agency at the time, and then how many were on the buy side? How many were on the
Yeah.
acquire side?
Yeah. Test my memory here a little bit. My agency was fairly small. We had, between 4 and 6 people, kind of a variation of full-time, part-time. We had about 15 different clients that we were serving at the time, from small, medium, large businesses. On the buy side, and this is where my memories will be tested a little bit, I want to say they were in the range of somewhere between 100 and 150 employees, a lot of contractors and some overseas contractors as well. And I'm blanking how many clients right now, but it was definitely larger. I was a little bit of a smaller fish, so to speak, coming into a larger pond. But again, it never felt like that. I was given immediate trust and responsibility, and my clients just fit right into their existing client portfolio.
Yeah, and it's very helpful, right? The small team being
Mm-hmm.
embraced by a
Mm-hmm.
larger system, a
Mm-hmm.
system that has done M&A before, so it's not like they're
Mm-hmm.
tripping over themselves trying to figure out
Mm-hmm.
how it's going to work.
Mm-hmm.
How did the deal go? Was it something that was collaborative? Was there a lot of lawyers involved? Was it
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to compare it to the next one
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
share. So like the deal itself compared to the complexity of the next deal you were involved in, how would you rank it?
Yeah. Yeah. It was a more simple deal, for sure. It was very simple. They did have a lawyer who drew up the paperwork. I had a lawyer who reviewed the paperwork. Um, there wasn't a lot of back and forth. It was fairly simple and straightforward, which made it easier to come to terms and agree on things. very short. The closing binder was very, very brief in comparison to my second acquisition, where it was like a 200-page closing binder. This one was much more simple, straightforward, um, easy to navigate. I did have my lawyer just look at it just to help me look for any pitfalls, and he changed one or two sentences that were just really minor, but changed to protect me just a little bit more, and gave me some advice. I even reached out to a colleague who happened to be a broker. I didn't enlist their services, but I asked him to review it and look at it, and he gave me some great advice, which I'm glad I followed. And that's part two. And what kind of made me feel comfortable going in is, as I was getting kind of third party advice of, hey, this is the deal I'm looking at, can you give me some advice? And they talked me through a few things that helped me kind of help create a deal that was that I felt comfortable with. And the buy side, the CEO who was purchasing my agency, definitely a sharp negotiator, definitely knew how to push as far as he could. And as I realized that he was going to be a shrewd negotiator, that's when I enlisted kind of some people on my end just to help me make sure that I'm not leaving money on the table. Help me make sure I'm getting a fair deal here. And the buyer's, his intent was never to be unfair, but he was a negotiator, and that's what he did, and he was very good at it. And there's probably a couple things where I could have pushed harder, but ultimately it was such a good deal. When I say good deal, it was such a good cultural fit. I was very happy to be with that company, and it was worth maybe losing a little bit on the monetary side to go to a company where I was just, it was a very good cultural fit for me, and gave me some fantastic opportunities in my career, and definitely kind of paid on the backside. So,
assuming there's some structure of earnout or performance provision associated with it, how did you bridge okay, I'm bringing my team in, bringing in my asset, and now I'm part of this bigger system which I'm going to contribute to? Did the incentive align with how you spent your time and energy in the company, or was there misalignment in it? How did that work for you?
Yeah. Well, it was a 100% equity deal, and because this company that I joined was planning on being acquired themselves in the future, and so it was kind of based on the fact that at some point there would be another acquisition with a buyout, and ideally a cash transaction. And so, kind of my incentive as I joined as a minority partner is basically what happened, and I received some equity in the business. The incentive was to maximize the value of the company so that we could, have another acquisition and a buyout that would be a good deal for us financially. And so yeah, that aligned with everything I wanted to do, which was, how do we run a profitable company? How do we serve our customers? How do we keep them happy? How do we retain them? How do we grow this business? I was 100% aligned with all of that.
Was there anything that you negotiated or didn't negotiate in your transaction that when it came to the next transaction you thought could have been advantageous to bake in early on? Or because I'm signaling kind of where we're headed with your story a little bit, but I want to make sure you're bringing in an asset. I called it the golden ticket for entry, right? It's your pay price for entry. You now have equity. You're a minority partner in this larger agency that's been growing through acquisitions. And it has the objective of being acquired itself, right? So liquidating or creating some return for the people who are holding that equity. What did you see in how your equity was treated, or in the outcome as it led to your next transaction?
Yeah, I think with the next transaction, at the beginning I was given a very fair deal in that second acquisition, but on the surface, and we'll talk about in a little bit, it turned out that it didn't work out so well at the end. And kind of what I perhaps would have wished in that first acquisition, knowing that the goal was to go through another acquisition, and also knowing that I was coming in as a minority partner. I don't think it was intentional. The owner I worked for was very kind and fair. I think it was more just of an oversight. I didn't have much of a seat at the table during the negotiations for the second acquisition. I was brought in very late, asked to review things very late in the game, and was almost, I did raise a few points I was concerned about, but at that point it was like, look, we just need you to sign off on this. And as minority partner, there wasn't a whole lot I could do or say. It was either, so I didn't have a whole lot of options there. And so that's where I wish maybe I would have had a more conversation, transparency around is, okay, when we're ready to do this, what will my seat at the table be, and how can I contribute, and how can I make sure that it's fair for all of us and not just the four, majority partners. And so that's where I think I probably would have redid things.
What was the timeline So you came in,
Mhm.
and then what was the timeline before that next event?
It was only a year. It happened very fast. It was a little bit faster than I think they'd anticipated, but an opportunity had come up that they decided to jump on. And so it was a year until the next acquisition. And then the nice thing about the initial phase of the acquisition is we didn't integrate that first year. We just kind of kept operating. We just happened to be owned by somebody else. And then the second year, it was when we started an integration and things got to be a little bit interesting.
Uh, so they have an opportunity.
Mhm.
You're a minority equity holder in this business.
Mhm.
They say, it's here. It happened rather fast. Like we
Mhm.
said, the
Mhm.
plan in motion is going to realize the pot of gold at the end.
Mhm.
Uh, what did that uh, transaction look like? And how much you talked about minimal involvement? How much
Mhm.
expectation did you have for you financially in the next
Mhm.
transaction?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and that was the interesting part, the way the transaction was organized. Without going into too many details, it was part cash, it was part equity swap, and then there was a retention bonus that was tacked onto it as well. Um, and whereas I was a minority partner, the cash and equity swap was on the smaller side compared to my other partners. But then because my current employer agency had felt that I was such a valuable asset, they talked the buyer into giving me a very large retention bonus that it actually exceeded what would have happened in during the acquisition transaction. And so that to me it was exciting to me at the forefront, that I had that opportunity to be a part of a bigger business and continue to run this and have another opportunity for an exit down the road, as that retention bonus eventually kicked in. Where I wish I'd gotten, either more say in the table or more a bigger place at the table or more say or consulted maybe a few more people on my end is that retention bonus unfortunately didn't come with any employment guarantees. They were able to exit me whenever they wanted, which means once they did, I forfeited that bonus. So that was a big kind of disappointment there. That once their leadership turned over, and maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but they did have a turnover in leadership, not too about 2 years after the transaction. And that new leader decided to exit several people, including me. And I had no protections, and had to walk away from that retention bonus that was part of the transaction.
And this is an important lesson, right?
Mhm.
When you look at what was this, 3, 4 years period of
Mhm.
time, right? Where
Mhm.
you're an entrepreneur running your own team.
Mhm.
You merge into a 100+ person company. You're
Mhm.
running that department. A year later, you're transacting to the next tier
Mhm.
of position within this large. How many people were in the company that bought you?
Over 1,000. Yeah, it was over a
Yep.
thousand. A billion-dollar company. Quite a bit larger than us. We came in definitely as minority partners ourselves, but yeah, it was a large enterprise that we joined.
Yeah, that's a whirlwind in a
Mhm.
short amount of time.
Yeah.
Um, and I go back to your original motivation, which was, stability, financial security for you and your family. You have kids
Mhm.
going to in high school at
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
time of this
Yeah.
crazy period.
Yeah.
Uh, how did you balance that emotionally? Because that's a lot going on.
Yeah, yeah, it was, that first year it was easier because we actually didn't start an integration that first year, and so we were acquired, and then we were told just keep doing what you're doing. Here's your goals. Thanks again, type thing. And so that first year it was kind of business as usual, not a whole lot of changes. We kept having questions on, oh, well, how should we we now have equity in this larger company, but we're not being asked to contribute. So, we kept looking for ways to help maximize our own equity, the value of our own equity in that company. And that eventually led to an integration about a year after the acquisition, where we began to look for opportunities to how can we help benefit our new parent company? How can we help them grow? How can we help them succeed? Because financially, that's what we were being incentivized on, but we hadn't been given a vehicle to actually, contribute. So the integration Talk about, life balance and financial security. Definitely it gave me much more financial security. We were backed by a very large company, and I wasn't terribly worried about that changing anytime soon. But as we began the integration and as positions started changing and some of my original partners began to exit, because a couple of them exited right at the acquisition, and they're like, hey, this was our ticket. We're done. We're going to go start our next venture. And so kind of two exited, and well, I won't go into all that, but a handful exited, and little by little, more and more partners started exiting. And so as my original partners began exiting, and I started kind of receiving, oh, well, so and so left. Now we need you to step in there. Oh, so and so left. Can you now absorb this? And I almost became this person where everything kept getting dumped on me until I ended up really with two full-time jobs almost, where trying to run an integration, trying to run the original agency, trying to contribute to the new company, they were trying to do more with less, and just letting people exit and not replace them. And so that became a huge strain on me emotionally, on my family. I was working too much, didn't feel like I was accomplishing anything, didn't feel like I was even accomplishing the goals I'd set out to accomplish. And I could do either one thing really, really well, or I could try to do these two things and do them kind of mediocre, and so there was a lot of change that happened that second year after the acquisition that did make it more difficult. It wasn't what we expected. It was almost like combining oil and water. We were two very, very different companies. And in trying to integrate, we all kept thinking, oh, this will be easy. We'll just do X, Y, and Z. But then we'd start down that path and go, oh, you guys operate completely differently here. You don't even look at it the same way we do. We look at it this way. You look at it that way. And we're on complete different sides of the fence here. And so even trying to integrate just perceptions and strategies, and who is our customer, and how do we treat a customer, and it turned out there was a very big gap culturally, very big gap strategically, very big gap in even just how we operated. We were our little agency was, very nimble, very fast, very agile, whereas this larger company, and it's the nature of larger companies, much more slower, more red tape, more bureaucratic, more like get 10 people sign-offs before you do anything, much slower to work. And we all had, I would say, especially me, I had a hard time kind of integrating into that of, what do you mean I can't go do this? I have to get 5 people to sign off first. I'm not used to that dynamic. I'm used to just kind of picking up and going where I need to go. So it was, as we began the integration, it was definitely became very obvious that the cultural and operational fit wasn't there. And it was definitely a big strain on a lot of us.
Yeah. Was it something that seemed unorganized, pre-planned, something they're aware of, something they didn't anticipate? Where would you put this from a intention perspective? Because integrations are always messy, right? To some degree.
Yeah. It felt like to us that there wasn't a plan. It felt like we had been purchased kind of just to purchase us without a whole lot of forethought as to then what was next. And so, and as we started integrating, it also felt like that was more reactionary to some market pressures that they were feeling. There were some pretty serious market pressures that they were scrambling to respond to. And I think they saw us as one solution to some of their problems. And so it felt like a knee-jerk reaction when all of a sudden they're like, okay, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and you're going to integrate here, and now you're going to do this, now you're going to operate this way. It felt very much like a knee-jerk reaction to kind of a threat that they had in the environment. And we became an afterthought. The agency that had been acquired, we became this afterthought that became almost a tool for them to get where they wanted to go, and less about, what was the purpose of our existence type thing, if that makes sense. And so it definitely felt a little reactionary, a little disorganized, and we even as we started and realized that things were bumpier than we thought, then we at first it was just, okay, jump in and just fix all these things. Oh, wait, that's not going to work. Okay, let's back up. And then all of a sudden we went into almost like planning hell, right? It was like, let's plan out every single detail and every single thing. But then we weren't doing anything. And then we got stuck in this, like, let's just plan ad nauseum, but not get anywhere. And then we felt like it just kind of flip-flop between planning almost too much and then moving too fast. And we never seemed to find the right balance of ripping the Band-Aid off versus thinking through things, and being stalled because we were being too analytical.
Yeah. Just when you're running a small business, or even if it's, 100 people, still relatively small compared to where you ended up.
Yeah.
Uh, it's a very different work environment.
Very.
And the things that make that business successful aren't the same things that work in big corporations. And
Mhm.
if you, unless you have an evangelist or a champion or you're a priority, it's very
Mhm.
hard for you to port in and thrive and be successful. What year or how many years in were you before things started to shake and the rattle started getting louder?
Let's see. It was 2 years, 2 years post acquisition that things started getting. It felt unstable. It felt like we don't understand what the purpose is. I mean, looking back at it, I wish during the acquisition phase we had talked about what is the purpose of this acquisition. What is your long term vision? How do you see us interacting? I wish we'd explored that a little bit more, rather than it felt like we went through the acquisition. Okay, it's done. We don't know what we're going to do with you, so just keep doing what you're doing. And then it was, oh wait, we have an emergency. We have this urgent priority. We think you can help us with this urgent priority. Go, don't worry about what you're working on right now. Please come work with us on these things. It felt very knee jerk reaction type thing. But yeah, that was 2 years post acquisition. We were kind of headfirst into figuring out how to integrate the two companies more tightly so that we were supporting that parent company more fully than we were before.
What year was that?
That was 2023. It was last year. Well, it was end of 2022 that we started moving a lot of things, and then 2023 kind of everything started fleshing out. So we were acquired in 2021 in the spring, and then started the integration in the fall of 2022.
When you think back to your first transaction
Mhm.
and the timing there,
Mhm.
you've had a very, you could have had a very different 2020 post life
Yeah,
being an entrepreneur
yeah.
and on your own. Although it was challenging and fraught with messy management and
Mhm.
structures and styles, do you think the last few years still were better than if you had stayed on your own?
Um, I think that I would say joining that first company, that first acquisition was one of the best decisions I'd made. We accomplished, it was fulfilling, it was rewarding, it provided stability. We are capitalizing on all that. I work in the e-commerce space, and so during 2020, e-commerce took off,
It was
and
your
we
show.
rode
Yeah.
we rode that wave. So it was very, very exciting. Um, as the economy began to contract in 2023, and management turned over, so this was after the second acquisition, and management started turning over, and there was a lot of kind of all hands on deck type things, kind of trying to deal with the contraction of the economy and contraction of sales we were experiencing and profitability. I wish during that period that I had still been a part of a more nimble agency, while the economy was contracting. Because at that point, we were part of this huge corporation that was taking a very long time. It was like, turning the Titanic at that point, because they had so many, so many arms and so many places and so many things to manage and work with. And so, I think I wish, as we gone through this period of economic uncertainty, I wish I was with more of that mid-sized company, that first agency that I joined, because I felt like we were probably a little bit more prepared to kind of be nimble and agile and be able to pivot as the economy turned around.
And then you're talking about that management turnover,
Yeah.
which ultimately led to the exit of your involvement in the company
Yeah.
in a not very nice way.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Give us some uh, color around that. The leadership, the people that you knew
Hmm.
were now gone.
Yep.
They change
Yeah.
the guard, and the next
Hmm.
manager, the next leadership comes in. What happens?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was very, very fast too. But yeah, little by little, my previous partners had left and exited, and I had been reporting into one of them. He was head of our agency, and I continued to report into him after the acquisition. He had exited, and I reported to another gentleman. We got along fine, and things were good. But then there was another shakeup of management, and so he was moved to a different position, and then I all of a sudden was reporting to a new CEO. Um, and in retrospect, it took a little while. It took about 2 months before he exited me. But as I looked, you look back in 2020, is hindsight is 2020. I could see that he had made up his mind as soon as he got put in that position that he wanted to change things and move things around. And so I was never given a reason as to why he wanted to change. He just asked me to, hey, we would like you to exit the company, and let's talk about that. And I was blindsided, to be quite honest. I felt like I was hitting as he had started. I'd shown him, hey, these are the KPIs I'm working towards. Are you aligned with these? Is this what you want me doing? And I kept getting positive. Oh yeah, that's great. Keep doing what you're doing. But he obviously had other intentions of reorganizing the teams when he came in, and he just kind of led me along a little bit, I think, until he was ready to pull the plug. So I didn't see it coming at all. It definitely blindsided me. And as I tried to negotiate keeping my retention bonus, that was a huge part of the deal of the acquisition deal, they weren't interested. They weren't interested in honoring that in any way, shape, or form. And I had no protections in acquisition to protect my employment. I'm still a member of the LLC and a partner, which is ironic. There was protections there that I couldn't be kicked out of the LLC that was formed to form the partnership, but there was no protections of my employment, and all my retention bonuses were based on being employed, not necessarily on being a partner. And so in hindsight, knowing that was such a huge part of the acquisition agreement, I wish we would have buttoned that up a little bit further. And I don't think anyone was thinking about that, but it definitely came back to bite me.
Yeah. When you go through that purchase agreement, it's basically all the things that can go wrong and how you're going to circumvent or address them.
Yep.
And assuming good intent by your former partners, they just probably didn't think far enough down the road of all the possible scenarios that could have a consequence on the team. But there's material ones. When you're a part of an organization, depending on the amount of controls you have based on your entry, understanding many years down the line the implications for every dollar you can earn, your job, your commitment to that organization, and then say, what if? What if this happens? Okay, well, what if this happens? And play that game over. So what you've alluded to it, but what is the specific advice you'd give yourself if you were given the opportunity to put that in place?
Yeah. I think it would be definitely, if the parts of the acquisition is, if there's like some sort of cash payout or equity vesting or whatever it is, whether it's a vesting schedule or cash payments over time, making sure that there is protections for you, that you can't just get kicked out of that for no reason. Obviously, if someone does something egregious, had I broken the law, had I egregiously violated my response, or abdicated my responsibilities, that obviously they would needed a mechanism to to exit someone who's just not, quite frankly, feeling the responsibilities. But putting in some sort of clause that at least says, unless you're breaking the law, unless you're not getting the job done, and if you aren't getting the job done, there's some sort of period where they at least address that with you, and you're given a chance to turn it around and make sure everyone's on the same page before an exit's decided on. Just getting those protections. Anytime you've got a vesting schedule or a cash payout schedule that's dependent on employment, you got to make sure that employment is protected in the event that a new manager comes in and decides that, oh, I want to build my own team, so I'm going to exit these 4 people that I inherited. Oh, I'm sorry, you had a retention bonus coming. Well, that's too bad, because I need these other people to manage my team. That's really what it kind of boiled down to. And so don't, and when you bring up, oh, well, what about this? What about that? And maybe you trust the person who's doing the buying, and they say, oh no, we don't have any plans for that. Oh no, you're our star player. We're going to keep you on forever. We see you as a leader in the company. Well, that's great. But what happens when that person is no longer there? And that's kind of what happened to me. What happens when that person who believed in you so much exits, and now somebody else is calling the shots, and doesn't know you from from the next person. And so I think just making sure that as you're agreeing to, the transaction, making sure that there's some sort of guarantee of payout that is based on concrete KPIs or concrete, steps that you can take to make sure that you get that, and that you're protected from a change in management or other things.
And what about your team throughout this process? Because you brought in some people too. Did they stick around, or what did their life look like?
Yeah, my original acquisition, I think all but one stayed around and eventually took on leadership positions in the new company and did very well and thrived and enjoyed that first acquisition as much as I did. The second acquisition, we saw a lot of turnover. At that point, we had almost 200 employees when we were acquired by the larger company, and there was a lot of turnover, a lot of and it was due to multiple things. One is just uncertainty, like people just get nervous and scared, and oh, I don't, we just got acquired. Do we still have a job? What's going to happen? I think I just better go look for another job while I have a chance. And these are all people who, they were employees and weren't necessarily partners in the business and didn't receive any other than employment. There was not a big, upside for them or a change for them, but so people left because of nervousness. People also left as we started the integration and we started realizing that cultures were a little bit like oil and water. So people became, I don't want to work here anymore. I want something different. And so some people left for that. But and a lot of the leadership team ended up, turning over and looking for. Some of them wanted to go back to a smaller company where they could be more agile, have more autonomy, be able to have more of an influence in the business. And so kind of those three reasons we saw a lot of people exit after that second acquisition.
Yeah. Like you put your hat on and think like the original founders who started growing through M&A, right? You were
Mm-hmm.
deal 3,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
they have this vision of scaling and growing and then maturing at different levels,
Mm-hmm.
and then what that yields for them financially. It's
Mm-hmm.
very hard to
Mm-hmm.
achieve that critical mass
Mm-hmm.
and keep and retain everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
People they've elected to be a part of a company based upon what it offers. And
Mm-hmm.
if what it offers changes,
Mm-hmm.
people will leave. And most
Mm-hmm.
buyers are sensitive to that. They know there's
Mm-hmm.
a consequence or casualty to these deals.
Mm-hmm.
Did the turnover have a substantial negative impact on the business, or was the acquirer, the buyer, so big that it was like, oh, we know that this is going to happen? It's inconsequential.
Yeah, it didn't impact the parent company as much as it impacted our little agency. Our agency was a very high touch agency, meaning we had a lot of interaction with clients, and clients would become very attached to who they were working with. And so there was definitely a negative effect on our client base as we started losing employees and turning over employees. Then clients, they would get passed around from account manager to account manager, and it wasn't a good experience. So then they would leave to find a more, quote unquote, stable agency who could serve them a little bit more consistently. And so definitely had an impact to the agency side of the business. The parent company, they number one were so large that we were kind of a blip on the radar, and they weren't very reliant on our income or our operations at all. So
Yeah. You are asked to leave.
mhm,
Um, what options or restrictions did you have as
mhm.
you exited the company to what you could do, if any?
Yeah, I do have. So my restrictive period is still in force. It was like a 3 or 4 year restrictive agreement, and so there's non-competes and there's non-solicitation and things like that I have to navigate around, which is tough when I work in a very very niche industry, and everyone knows each other, and so it's been a little tough to navigate around, and so that would be something that I would look at too. Like if you are exited prematurely before, on against your will or for an at will reason, right? You can terminate someone for cause, or you can terminate someone because you want to. And that's kind of the latter is what happened to me. And it would have been nice to maybe have that restrictive covenant, lifted if they had exited me on a whim, on based on their changeover of management. So that's something to keep in mind if you've got that restrictive covenant. What happens if, obviously if it, you can decide to exit, but what happens if they decide that you're going to exit? Are you going to be able to support yourself and manage your career the way you want to?
Yeah, great advice.
Mm-hmm.
It's all these things that you can kind of
Mm-hmm.
get caught up in the future casting
Mm-hmm.
of size, scale, opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have to say, okay, well, what if this doesn't work out?
Yep.
This is my job. This is my livelihood. This is my profession.
Mm-hmm.
Can I still do that in some
Mm-hmm.
capacity if I'm not doing it here? And
Yeah.
these things are fair
Mm-hmm.
asks in a
Mm-hmm.
transaction.
Mm-hmm.
They're they're basic essentials that often are overlooked because they're so basic, right? You don't think of, everyone's caught up into the momentum of the future.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and this perspective is incredibly valuable, because not everyone is sitting in the pure negotiating seat. Some are
Mm-hmm.
the next seat over. And when you're in
Mm-hmm.
the next seat over, you don't get to always influence it as much as you
Mm-hmm.
like.
Yep.
So if you can go back in time and say, okay, maybe I could have baked this in as an expectation of my equity, or
Mm-hmm.
in my first transaction, because
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes people are so enamored with the first company, right? You're close
Mm-hmm.
with the partners, you're
Mm-hmm.
really enthusiastic. That's the time to bake in the
Mm-hmm.
next transaction assumptions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
protects you. And so
Yeah.
they have to transact with your expectations in
Yep.
mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sound advice if you're being approached by someone who's doing a roll up and someone who's
Mm-hmm.
aggregating within a category,
Mm-hmm.
during your highest point of contribution,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because
Mm-hmm.
your contribution starts to change, weaken a bit
Mm-hmm.
once you're
Mm-hmm.
in the system.
Yep. Yeah.
During that first transaction, you have a lot of opportunity to bake in the things for your team and for yourself.
Yep. Yep.
Um, what,
Exactly.
what else? We're in the DeLorean, filled
Mm-hmm.
up on trash and bananas or whatever whatever Doc put in it. We go back in time. What other advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, I've talked about, just making sure there's some sort of employment security, even like I said, this retention bonus I was given, it wasn't going to be triggered until another purchase event, even. It was dependent on that. And there was no vesting schedule. Like if I stayed for a year, did I get a percentage of it? If I stayed for 2 years, do I get another percentage of it? And so, either building in, well, both really building in that employment security, where I could only be fired for cause, if it came to that instead of at will. And then, having that retention bonus, that was part of the transaction, it would have been nice if that was on a vesting schedule. Like, hey, you put in a year, here you go. Here you put in 2 years, there you go. You at least walk away with something if you decide to walk away early and for various reasons. And so, so that, and I think just kind of overall advice is, don't bank on, during these transactions, like I said, a lot of people get excited. They're thinking about the future, and a lot of just verbal promises start to get made of, oh, we don't need a vesting schedule because this change, this other change in ownership we're going to have, this IPO or change in ownership, it's going to happen in a year. So you guys will be able to cash out in a year. Well, 4 years later, they still haven't had their IPO. And so that's why none of us vested, because the vesting was dependent on this future transaction that never happened. And but we kept believing them, right? We kept believing, oh, they said it's going to happen by the end of the year and we'll all walk away with life-changing amounts of money. It never happened. So we never vested. So that's why I walked away without that retention bonus, because it was based on an IPO event that never happened. So I think getting things in writing and not counting on, if someone's saying something verbally, don't count on it unless it's also in the contract, because management can change, the economy can change, and that's part of what happened. The economy changed and it wasn't the right time for an IPO. None of us foresaw that, right? So it wasn't necessarily intentional on their part. It was, things changed, it wasn't the right time, we're going to have to stall and we're going to have to wait longer for this. But that meant that a lot of us exited without ever seeing the rewards that we were promised verbally and whatnot. So don't, definitely, as you're in that excitement of, oh, this is such a great opportunity and they're promising me this and promising me leadership positions and promising me stock and promising me whatever, if it's not in writing, don't plan on it. Like, don't even write it down. You've got to have, if it's that important to you, and if they're saying it and you want it, then get it into the contract, and get dates in place, get vesting schedules in place, get, what happens if this doesn't happen in place, all the what ifs. Because that's part of how we got burned, I felt like, is we made the transaction based on a verbal assurance of, yeah, this is all dependent on this event, and this event will happen at the end of the year. Well, that event never happened. So we all walked away with quite a bit less than what we were told. So
Fantastic advice.
yeah.
Liz, not only have you contributed to someone else's, better structured deal, pragmatic realism in the face of enthusiasm, you've really set the course for a lot of people who are in your same seat to do it differently and better than you did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not going to replace the missed opportunity that was promised to you, all right, that image, but I really value you coming on and sharing the story, because this isn't one off. opportunities. These types of roll-ups, these types of participate in transactions down the line or in years to come as a way of providing, consideration for your business is common. And it's very important that people get this information and can plan for it appropriately. If someone's listening to this and it resonates, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn under Liz Adamson. Send me a message there, connect with me, and I'm happy to chat.
Liz, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Liz, for joining us today. And thank you for listening to Agency Acquisitions and Exits. You can find us on Spotify and YouTube. Give us a follow, click that like button, and subscribe. We post stories from industry experts about how they sold or acquired agencies. If you know someone who should share their story, give us a glimpse into that black box of M&A, leave us a comment. We'd love to talk to you. As always, thank you for listening. We appreciate you. Stay safe.